Marching Orders. Chapter 1. The Boot. The deafening clatter of bunks shook me awake, and before my eyes even adjusted, I could hear the drill instructor's voice, piercing and relentless. "Get up and get on my line. Move your ass, recruit!" His voice was loud enough to make the walls vibrate. Half asleep and fumbling, I barely managed to slide off my rack, feeling the urgency burn through my exhaustion. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. He counted down, drawing it out like a punishment in itself. My heart hammered, desperate to keep up with the pace. But as soon as I stumbled onto the line, our designated spot in front of the racks, marked in paint, he was already waiting, arms crossed, smirk in place. "Oh, you want to move on my line? Get back in the racks!" he yelled again, his voice echoing across the barracks. We scrambled back into bed, not even a second to breathe before he barked out, "Move! Move it! Oh, you recruits want to sleep. You feel sleepy?" His voice dripped with mockery. "No, sir," we shouted in response, voices cracking, some louder than others. But he wasn't satisfied. "I can't hear you," he boomed again, and we answered louder, trying to muster strength from reserves we didn't have. We barely got a "no, sir" out before he was back at it, like a relentless machine built to break us down. "Get on the line," he ordered, and we practically flew to our spots, pressing ourselves in neat, desperate lines. "Yes, sir." The sound of our voices seemed to fill the space, vibrating against the walls and ceiling, but it wasn't enough. Nothing ever was. "Oh yeah, y'all still sound sleepy. Get back in bed." His tone was mocking, daring us to protest. We bit back our frustration, forced ourselves to reply with a mechanical, "Yes, sir," and scrambled back to our racks. But it was all just part of the game. The back and forth went on to the line, back to the racks. It was a rhythm now, a twisted dance orchestrated by his voice, as we clambered, shouted, and obeyed, trying to stay a half step ahead of his endless commands. 10 minutes of this, maybe longer. Who could tell? It felt like an eternity. One of the guys had tried to resist early on, back when we thought we could still get away with some semblance of individuality. I remembered watching, trapped on the line, as he faced off with the drill instructor. The defiance flickered, faded, and then all but disappeared as more drill instructors closed in, towering over him like wolves around a rabbit. Push-ups, burpees, more push-ups. They kept him going until he could barely lift his arms. The rest of us stood at attention, our eyes trained straight ahead, counting down the seconds, the minutes, just waiting. And then one recruit scratched his nose. The drill instructor caught it immediately, zeroing in with a grin that could have chilled steel. "Hey, we got another one that wants to move. Good to go. Go join your moving buddy on the quarterdeck." The poor guy barely had a chance to react before he was hauled off to join the other recruit in front of the building. More push-ups, more burpees, more everything. We stood, still as statues, 98 of us locked in place, while the other two paid the price for stepping out of line. I kept my eyes forward, feeling the collective fear ripple through us. No one wanted to be next. This wasn't just discipline. It was something deeper, something unsettling that pushed us to our limits and beyond. I'd heard that the drill instructor's mission was to strip us of whatever identity we clung to break us down so they could reshape us into something unflinching, something relentless. And as the minutes dragged on, I could feel pieces of myself being chipped away, piece by piece, drill by drill. Finally, the two recruits returned to the line, their faces pale and drawn, sweat plastered across their foreheads. I thought it was over, that we might actually get to sleep. But just as my shoulders started to relax, the drill instructor's voice cut through the silence. "Fall out of the building with your rifles." A groan rose up, barely suppressed, as we braced ourselves for whatever lay ahead. The night wasn't over. If you've never been to Parris Island, South Carolina, not North Carolina, as they'd always remind us, then you've never felt the pure, unrelenting misery of the sand fleas. Tiny, relentless creatures that showed no mercy. And unlike the drill instructors, they didn't need a reason to punish us. They just did, constantly, mercilessly. The drill instructors had a special product that kept them safe from the bites, but that was off limits for us. We were recruits, stripped of all but the bare minimum, left to face every brutal element this island had to offer. That night, after the usual game of on the line, back in the racks, they ordered us outside. Everyone except the two recruits still sweating on the quarterdeck. They were made to stand at attention and watch us through the barracks windows. Their faces pale under the fluorescent lights, shame written in every line. Out! Let's go, recruits! Move it! The drill instructor barked as we filed out, each of us mentally steeling ourselves. My stomach dropped as we rounded the building, eyes catching sight of the one place we hated more than anywhere else, the sand pit. A massive, brutal sandbox crawling with those damn fleas. It wasn't just sand, no. This was punishment in its rawest form, an endurance test of pain and discipline. All right, recruits, the drill instructor called out as we lined up. You think you can stand still for 2 minutes in this pit? Show me. Stand at attention. No movement. Not a single twitch. Your two buddies inside paid for their mistakes. Now you pay for them, too. His voice was cold, emotionless, but his words burned. When we win as one, he started, making us chant back, when we fail as one. The words rang hollow, echoing out as if the night air itself was mocking us. Still, we kept repeating it, letting the rhythm anchor us as we forced ourselves to stay still. Sand fleas began covering my hands within seconds. I could feel them skittering up my arms, circling my wrists, creeping into my ears, and biting my face. I clenched my jaw, feeling them crawling around my eyes and my nostrils, every small movement tempting me to swat them away. Each of us stood there, silent, mouths sealed shut as we endured the onslaught. I glanced at the other recruits, some of their faces twisted in agony, but no one dared to move. One scratch would mean more time. We all knew it. The drill instructor's voice boomed again. Your 2 minutes starts now. If you can stay still, you'll be back inside with your buddies, enjoying the AC. I knew he was lying, that we weren't going anywhere until he was done with us. He wanted us to squirm, to give in, to fail. But we were in too deep. My eyes watered as I held back from blinking, as if even that would be a betrayal to the rest of the line. I forced myself to stare straight ahead, biting down on the inside of my cheek to avoid crying out, as the fleas seemed to find every exposed patch of skin, every gap in my uniform. Some NCOs had gathered nearby, watching the spectacle with something between pity and nostalgia. It was like they were reliving their own time in the pit, knowing the sting of every bite, the challenge of not moving even as your body screamed for relief. I caught glimpses of them out of the corner of my eye, and for a second, a flicker of frustration crossed my mind. They'd survived it, and they wanted to watch us do the same. As the minutes dragged on, the bites worsened, each one more painful than the last. I forced my mouth shut but tried to blow some of the fleas away from my face, desperate for relief without giving any sign of movement. But it was hopeless. They were everywhere, crawling and biting in a frenzy. The silence was full of muffled groans, the desperate shuffling of feet trying not to move, even though every instinct told us to run. Inside, the two recruits on the quarterdeck stood watching us, their faces a mix of guilt and horror. I knew it killed them to see us suffering for their mistakes, knowing that if they hadn't screwed up, we wouldn't be standing here. The lesson was searing itself into all of us. Our mistakes weren't just our own. We were a team, bound together by every step we took and every failure we endured. When one fell, we all paid the price. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the drill instructor called us out of the pit, back into formation, and marched us back to the barracks. We stumbled back into line, each of us marked with dozens of bites, itching and stinging all over. No one said a word, but we could feel the shift, a silent promise hanging in the air that we'd never forget. There we stood, 98 of us, bitten, bruised, silent, and 2 recruits with shame written across their faces. It was only the end of a rough night, but dawn wasn't far off. There have been many days like that, but today is a new day. This day will be better. Whatever hell the drill instructors had planned today, we'd face it together,